The sound of the slap cut through the room sharper than the priest's voice. My head snapped sideways. For a second, I couldn't even feel it, just the shock. The silence that followed was worse. No gasps, no shouting, no one stepping forward, just stillness. Have you ever been surrounded by people and suddenly realized you were completely alone? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. I was standing at my husband's memorial. 46 years of marriage reduced to a framed photograph and a room full of black clothes. And in front of all of them, my daughter-in-law had just hit me. I slowly turned my head back. Vanessa Ellis, 38, perfect posture, perfect makeup, not a single crack in her expression. Her hand was still slightly raised, like she hadn't expected me to say no. "Give me the house keys, Margaret," she said again, quieter this time, controlled, almost polite. The house keys. I stared at her, trying to understand what was happening. My house. The one Richard and I bought before Daniel was even born. The one with the creaky stairs and the dent in the hallway wall from when he was 8. "No," I said. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was the last thing she expected. That's when she slapped me. And what did everyone else do? Nothing. I looked around the room. Neighbours, friends, my own son. Daniel wouldn't meet my eyes. That's when something shifted. Because grief? I understood that. Loss? I was drowning in it. But this wasn't grief. This felt planned. My chest tightened, but I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't ask for help. I just stood there for a moment longer, letting it settle. Then I turned and walked out. No one stopped me. The cold air outside hit my face, sharp and real. I could still feel the sting on my cheek, but something else had taken over now. Clarity. Because deep down, a quiet thought surfaced, one I had been ignoring for weeks. This didn't start today. I reached into my purse with steady hands, pulled out my phone, and as the wind brushed past me, I made a call. One call. A call I should have made a long time ago. "Thomas," I said when he answered. My voice didn't shake. "I think something's been taken from me." There was a pause on the other end. Then he said, "Stay where you are." I looked back at the doors of the memorial hall, and for the first time that day, I wasn't afraid. Because I had the sudden, sinking feeling whatever Vanessa believed she had just taken wasn't hers yet. "You think this started with a slap?" No. That was just the first moment it became visible. The truth is, it had been building for months. It started quietly, subtly, the kind of changes you almost question yourself for noticing. After Richard got sick, everything shifted. Not all at once, just enough to feel off. Vanessa stepped in more. At first, it seemed helpful, thoughtful even. She brought meals, organised his medications, sat beside him during appointments, taking notes like she was the only one who could understand what the doctors were saying. And me? I was right there, his wife. But somehow, I was always just slightly outside the conversation. "Don't worry about this, Margaret," she'd say gently. "I've got it handled." Handled. That word came up a lot. Then came the paperwork, stacks of it. Forms, documents, envelopes that used to land on our kitchen table, now somehow never made it past Vanessa's hands. "Just routine things," she'd say with a smile. Insurance, adjustments, nothing urgent. Nothing urgent. But if it wasn't urgent, why wasn't I allowed to see it? I remember one afternoon, standing in the hallway, hearing her voice drift from Richard's office. Soft, controlled. It's better if she doesn't worry about these things anymore. I froze. She was talking about me. I waited for Richard to say something, to correct her, to defend me, to say, she's my wife. But instead, there was silence. And then a quiet, almost tired voice. All right. That was the first time something cold settled in my chest, because Richard wasn't a passive man. He built everything we had from nothing. He used to argue over the smallest details, but now he was agreeing, or maybe giving in. Days later, I found a document on his desk, half hidden beneath a folder. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. It had his signature at the bottom, only it didn't look quite right. Close, convincing, but I had seen that signature for decades, and something about it felt off. That night I asked him, Richard, are you signing things without telling me? He didn't look at me, just sat there staring at his hands. It's taken care of, he said quietly. Don't fight it. Don't fight it. Not don't worry, not it's fine. Don't fight it. Who was I supposed to be fighting? I remember standing there, searching his face for something, anything, but it was like looking at a closed door. And I told myself, maybe it's the medication. Maybe he's just tired. Maybe I'm imagining things. So I let it go. I let all of it go. Until today. Until that moment. Until Vanessa stood in front of everyone and demanded the keys to a house I never gave away. And suddenly, every quiet moment, every missing document, every silence clicked into place. Because that wasn't a request. It was a claim. She believed that house already belonged to her. Here's the part that should have scared me the most, but didn't. It wasn't the slap. It wasn't even Vanessa. It was everyone else. I stood outside the memorial hall, the cold air biting into my skin, waiting, without admitting it, for someone to follow me. My son, a friend, anyone. No one came. Have you ever realized, all at once, that the room you thought you belonged in had already moved on without you? I looked back at the doors. Closed. Whatever was happening inside, it was continuing, as if I had never been there at all. And strangely, that's when the fear disappeared. Because fear needs uncertainty. And in that moment, things started becoming very clear. Vanessa hadn't acted alone. She couldn't have. Not with that kind of confidence. Not in front of that many people. Which meant one thing. She believed she was protected. That's when I made the call. Thomas, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I think something's been taken from me. There was no confusion on the other end, no hesitation, just a pause. Then, stay where you are, I'm coming. That told me everything I needed to know, because Thomas Green didn't rush. Not in all the years I'd known him. If he was coming immediately, he already suspected something. Minutes passed slowly. The wind tugged at my coat, but I barely noticed. Instead, my mind replayed something I had pushed aside before. A document. A week before Richard died, Vanessa had brought it into the room, smiling, calm. Just a small adjustment, she said. Asset protection. It's standard. Richard signed it, quickly, too quickly. I remember asking, "What is that?" And she answered without looking at me, "Nothing that affects you." Nothing that affects me. In my own home. At the time, I let it go, because confronting her felt exhausting, and Richard looked so tired. But standing outside that memorial, one thought kept repeating. What if that was the moment everything changed? A car pulled up sharply. Thomas stepped out, already holding a folder. No small talk, no condolences, just a look. And in that look, confirmation. Margaret, he said quietly. There are documents filed under Richard's name. My stomach tightened. What kind of documents? He didn't soften it. Property transfer. The words landed heavy. But, I shook my head. That's not possible. It shouldn't be, he agreed. And that's the problem. A beat of silence passed between us. Then he closed the folder. We're going back inside. I hesitated. Not because I didn't want the truth, but because I knew, once those doors opened again, everything would change. Thomas met my eyes. You deserve to hear this where everyone can. I turned toward the building. The same doors I had just walked out of in silence. Now they felt different, heavier, final. We stepped forward together, and exactly 30 minutes after I had left, those doors opened again. When those doors opened, the silence returned. But this time, it wasn't for her. The room shifted the second we walked in. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned, eyes followed. But this time, I wasn't the same woman who had walked out. I wasn't confused. I wasn't humiliated. I was certain. Thomas walked beside me, calm and deliberate, a folder tucked under his arm, like it carried something heavier than paper. At the front of the room, Vanessa stood near Richard's photograph, still composed, still in control. Or at least, she thought she was. Her eyes landed on me first, then on Thomas. And for just a flicker of a second, something changed. Not fear. Recognition. Margaret, she said smoothly, as if nothing had happened. This really isn't the time. It is, Thomas interrupted. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. It cut clean through the room. People shifted. You could feel it, attention tightening, curiosity sharpening. Vanessa's smile thinned. I think we should respect. What we should respect, Thomas said, stepping forward, is the law. That did it. The room was no longer passive. People were listening now, watching closely. Even Daniel stepped forward, confusion written all over his face. Mom? What's going on? I didn't answer. I couldn't, not yet. Because this wasn't my moment. This was the truth catching up. Thomas opened the folder. Documents were filed 3 days ago, he said clearly. Transferring ownership of the Ellis residence. A ripple moved through the crowd. Vanessa didn't react immediately. That same controlled posture, that same careful stillness. But her eyes? They were calculating. There's nothing improper about estate planning, she said. Calm, measured. Correct, Thomas replied. When it's done legally. He pulled out a sheet. Signature inconsistencies. Witness signatures that don't align with the filing timeline. And most importantly, he paused, let the silence stretch. Documentation showing Mr. Ellis was not mentally competent at the time these were signed. That was the moment. You could feel it, like something invisible, snapping. Daniel looked at Vanessa, really looked at her this time. "What is he talking about?" he asked, his voice no longer steady. Vanessa didn't answer, because she couldn't. Because the control she had been holding onto so tightly was slipping. Thomas took one step closer. "These documents are not just invalid," he said. "They are grounds for a criminal investigation." And then it happened. Vanessa looked up, and for the first time since I had known her, she went completely still. Not composed, not controlled. Still. Because across the room, just beyond the crowd, uniformed officers had stepped inside. And the next words spoken weren't for the family anymore. "You want to know what really happened?" It wasn't sudden. It wasn't emotional. It was calculated. Every step. As the officers moved forward, the room that had once been silent out of discomfort was now silent for a different reason. Truth. Vanessa didn't fight. Not at first. She stood there, perfectly still, as if staying composed could somehow undo what had already been said. But the facts didn't change, and Thomas made sure of that. Over the next few days, everything came to light. Not guesses, not suspicions, proof. Vanessa had been positioning herself for months, slowly taking control of Richard's finances as his health declined. She redirected documents, isolated communication, and inserted herself into every legal and medical conversation. That asset protection document? It wasn't protection. It was a transfer. The house, the accounts, anything she could attach her name to. And the signatures? Some were rushed while Richard was heavily medicated. Others were simply not his. Forgery. Clear. Verifiable. And Thomas, quiet, patient Thomas, had already been watching, waiting until something concrete surfaced. The memorial confrontation? That wasn't grief. That was pressure. Vanessa needed control established publicly before the legal cracks showed. But she moved too soon, and in doing so, she exposed everything. I didn't cry when they took her out. Not when the whispers started. Not when people finally came over, offering soft apologies that came too late. I felt something else. Relief. Not loud, not overwhelming, just steady. Because for weeks, I had been questioning myself, my memory, my instincts. And now, I knew I hadn't imagined any of it. Richard's words echoed back to me. Don't fight it. He hadn't been giving up. He had been warning me. Vanessa was formally charged. Fraud, coercion, and elder financial abuse. The investigation didn't stay quiet for long. People talked. Neighbours, friends. Everyone who had stood there and said nothing. Their silence didn't disappear, but it changed shape. Daniel, that was harder. He didn't know everything, not fully. But he knew enough to have asked questions, and he didn't. We spoke weeks later, a long conversation, honest, uncomfortable. There's no neat repair for something like that, and I didn't pretend there was. The court ruling was clear. All fraudulent documents were void. The house, my home, remained mine. No conditions, no complications. Just truth, finally recognised. A few weeks later, I stood in the living room. Quiet, still. The same walls, the same light through the windows. Nothing had changed. And yet, everything had. I picked up Richard's photograph and placed it back where it belonged, right above the mantel. I looked at it for a long moment, not with grief this time, but with understanding. They tried to take everything, I said softly. The house stood still around me, solid, unmoved. And so was I. They just forgot one thing. I never left.